All right, let's talk to Michael Doran. Michael Doran is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. He specializes in Middle East security issues. His latest book, Ike's Gamble, America's Rise to Dominance in the Middle East, is out now. It's about President Eisenhower's handling of the 1956 Suez Crisis, which is a really, really fascinating subject. Yesterday, Michael Doran wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal that has become really controversial, saying that we shouldn't leave the Iran deal. It can be fixed. And we're going to talk about that. Mike, it's good to see you.
Hi, great to be here.
Let's begin. I want to cover this. One of the things that always bothers me about the news is that people keep talking about these things, the Iran deal or something, and they don't explain what it is. And people sort of kind of feel they know what it is, but they don't really. So let's begin with at the very beginning. What exactly is this deal that Obama made with the Iranian regime?
I'll tell you, but I have to caveat that by telling you that I'm telling you my truth.
That's the most important thing Oprah says you can do.
President Obama, one of the strange things about the Iran deal is that President Obama didn't tell the truth about it. He presented it to the country as an arms control agreement with the Iranians, and it was certainly that, but it was actually much bigger than that. It was a reorientation of American policy in the Middle East toward Iran. We, under the Obama administration, the United States aligned with Iran across the board, and he used the nuclear deal as the device for executing that. But he never admitted that. His former officials, the echo chamber, who are still having an oversized role in our national debate about the Middle East, they don't admit that that happened. They pretend that we were continuing to contain Iran and so on. So there's my view, and then there's what the Obamaites are saying, and they're really quite contradictory, and there's no consensus about this yet.
But the content of the deal itself was essentially that Iran could continue to amass nuclear materials as long as they didn't use them. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but they had to keep their stockpiles. They could continue to spin centrifuges and to enrich uranium, but they had to keep their stockpiles at a particular level, so that they wouldn't have the ability to break out and build a nuclear bomb within about a 1-year period. Different experts differ on about the time frame. But so they were given this enrichment. They were blessed with an enrichment capability by the international community, as long as they restricted their activities for about a decade. And then after a decade, the agreement sunsets. And they can go do whatever they want. That's one of the major criticisms of the conservatives of the deal, is the fact that it has sunsets to it.
And what was all this about the money that we were sending them? The pallets of money dropped in the dead of night from helicopters. I mean, what was that?
Well, we incentivized them to sign the deal by releasing assets that had been frozen by international law. And in addition, we incentivize them with regard to the money by settling some disputes between the two of us, some bilateral U.S.-Iranian disputes, settling them, in my view, very much in the Iranians' favor. There were all kinds of hidden concessions to the Iranians, as far as I understand the thing. We basically recognized Syria as an Iranian sphere of influence. And did nothing to counter the Iranians, or for that matter, the Russians, when they moved to prop up Assad. We stopped prosecuting narcotics cases against Hezbollah operatives in this country, in order not to anger Hezbollah, which is basically a wing of the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. So there were an enormous number of hidden costs to this thing as well.
So this is something I've never gotten a reasonable answer to. What was Obama thinking? I mean, Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. They hate us. They, talk about death to America all the time. Their leaders despise us. what brilliant vision did he have? I mean, I'm assuming, whenever I ask people people about this, I start to hear from the crazies who say, well, Obama's a secret Muslim who's working to build the
Uh,
caliphate. But surely there must be something
no,
that was on his mind.
I, no, I'm the perfect guy to explain this to you because I understand Obama's thinking about all of this. He's not a Kenyan communist in this regard, and he's not a closet Muslim. He's just an Ivy League professor in terms of his understanding of the world. I spent enough time in the Ivy League to be able to parrot how their lines about the world. He had basically three motivations. One was he wanted to go down in history as the guy who ended wars in the Middle East, who ended George W. Bush's wars. Number two, so that meant we had to pull back from Iraq. And the minute you say I'm going to pull American troops out of Iraq, well, you have this problem, and that there's Iran right next door, which has an outsized influence in Iraq. So if you're going to pull your troops out, Iran is going to start having it's going to start putting Iraq under its thumb. What is the United States going to do? Is it going to play its usual role of containing Iran, or is it going to give Iran a pass? So in order for Obama to achieve his goal of pulling the troops out of Iraq, he had to give Iran a pass right there in Iraq. But then he also had to give them a pass, or at least come to an agreement on the nuclear question. But basically what he did on the nuclear question is he just put it aside for 10 years, which was long enough for him to get out, to pull back from the Middle East, to get the peace that he wanted in Iraq, and so on. So that's factor one. Factor number two is that Obama seems to have decided, and I think a lot of foreign policy experts would agree with him on this, that now the real game in the world is in East Asia. It's the challenge of China, and we're kind of just throwing, wasting blood and treasure in the Middle East for no good purpose. And then the third thing is what I think you and I would both laugh at, which is that I really do believe that Obama felt that he had some kind of special insight into world affairs, some kind of factor X, that he was going to, unlike the Republicans who have this really nasty worldview, which in Obama's mind, your worldview, Drew, mine, it is self-defeating. We create the beasts that we say we want to slay. And if we just reach out our hand to these guys like the Iranians, then they'll stop fighting with us because we can find a kind of natural equilibrium because we are the problem. That's every Ivy League professor believes that. Barack Obama believes that, and he believed that he was the anointed one to come fix it all.
Okay. So we're talking to Michael Doran of the Hudson Institute, the author of Ike's Gamble, America's Rise to Dominance in the Middle East, which is about the Suez Crisis, one of the genuinely fascinating historical subjects. So you wrote this piece that I think you're getting a lot of flack for this, I think.
All my friends are very angry with me.
Okay.
I'm getting A2 Mike and... Yeah.
To explain, every now and again, the president of the United States has to re-ratify Obama's Iran deal, right? He has to say, yes, the Iranians are, in fact, holding up their end of the bargain. And I think it's today he has to do it again, right? Am I right about that?
Basically, it's actually tomorrow and perhaps the next day. I'm a little bit confused because what we're looking at here is the confluence right now of two legislatively mandated timelines, the Inara timeline and it's inside baseball. But every 90 days and every 180 days, by according to two different pieces of legislation, he has to certify whether Iran is in compliance and whether we should waive or not waive the sanctions on them. The gist is this: the sanctions that we put on Iran before the nuclear deal are still in place legally, the American sanctions. And so when he waives them, when he waives the sanctions, it means we're not applying them. But he can decide to reapply them at a moment's notice. That's the question.
And your contention is that he should not ditch the deal, which a lot of people feel he should, but he should fix the deal. How can this deal be fixed?
Well, bear in mind that I think the deal is an abomination.
Okay.
Right. If Trump decides tomorrow to tank it, I'm not going to lose any sleep on that at all. For me, it's just a question of tactics. The question for me is, how do we contain Iran, and what's the smartest way to go about it? And if he decides tomorrow to reimpose the sanctions, that means what will happen is, in effect, he's pulling the United States out of the deal. So we're going into a major confrontation with Iran, and at the same time a major confrontation with our European allies, because when we reapply the sanctions, it means that we say to European companies they can't do business with Iran. So we go into a major conflict with our European allies and with the Russians and the Chinese as well, and into a conflict with the Iranians. Now, who in the U.S. government right now is in favor of this conflict? Well, perhaps Donald Trump, if he decides to do that, but then none of his advisors, not Mattis, not Tillerson, maybe Mike Pompeo. I don't know where Pompeo is, but Tillerson and Mattis are not there. The Europeans are not there. You just saw they very wisely, they went and they met with Zarif, the Iranian foreign minister, right, to thumb their nose at Trump. I wish they hadn't done that. It was very unwise, but they did it. And then the American press and the Democrats, right? So he's gonna go into a major conflict with nobody on his side, and I just think that's a mistake. It's not like we apply these sanctions and we topple Iran tomorrow. We're going to be in an extremely significant conflict, which could turn very ugly. And I was in the White House during the Iraq War. Just think about the way I look at this is that this legislation that they're trying to work on with Corker and Cardin and Cotton and so forth. The legislation to fix the deal just says basically, as a matter of American law, these sunsets in the nuclear deal are unacceptable. The intercontinental ballistic missiles of the Iranians are unacceptable. That the levels of uranium enrichment must stay where they are now, fixed, and if the Iranians move beyond them, then we're going to reimpose sanctions across the board. It's sort of a unilateral statement by the United States that if the Iranians ever move beyond the terms of the deal as we currently understand it, then we're going to reimpose sanctions.
So you're basically getting rid of the sunset clause.
Getting rid of it, according to American law.
Right.
And I look at this as a kind of laying a very rational, very reasonable basis. When you look at this regime, a reasonable basis for American policy that can get a lot of support on the left, and it can get a lot of support in Europe as well. And that is the better position to take when going into a conflict with Iran than to just go and throw the whole thing to the wind and then be blamed. I mean, you can already imagine how they're how right, everyone is going to team up to blame Trump on this. So I'm thinking about the day after and the day after that, when things get nasty and we have to call on people to help us.
Perfectly reasonable. Michael Doran, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, author of Ike's Gamble, America's Rise to Dominance in the Middle East. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
All
Take
right.
care.
Talk to you.